Welcome back to another exciting video, and what we're going to be talking about today is the easiest way to learn music theory. So you're probably thinking, hey, we're guitar guys, why are you sitting at a piano? I'm going to tell you why I'm sitting at a piano. This is the most easiest way to learn theory and chord structure. What do I mean by that? When I first started playing music, and I started playing on a guitar, of course, and I was just like most new guitar players, I was just arbitrarily playing chords. Didn't know if they belonged in the scale, just arbitrarily playing notes, didn't know if they belonged in the scale, just kind of hunting and picking my way through things. And the more interested I got into music, then it kind of led me to a piano. And we had one. My wife had a little upright at the time. And I would just kind of, same thing, just kind of hunt and pick on the piano, trying to figure out what's what. Well, as I became more and more interested in it, I started taking piano lessons, actually. And that really kind of started opening my eyes up to theory. And then when we got into theory, I was able to grasp and comprehend it so much easier than I could on guitar. And then, of course, after taking piano lessons, that led me to go to school for music, where I was actually a guitar major, piano minor. And then I I was a piano major, guitar minor. And I ended up switching that to a guitar major, piano minor. But if it wasn't for those piano lessons that I took, I never would have gotten the grasp of theory that I've got now. And it was just so much easier to understand and put all the pieces together, because the piano is very linear and it's very visual, to where a guitar is not very linear, and it's definitely not visual when it comes to chord structure and scales and stuff like that. And I'm going to show you exactly what I'm talking about. We're going to go over a few things here on theory, and I'm going to show you just how easy it is to understand on the piano. So to get started, we're just going to run over the major scale real quick. And this is why I like learning this on piano. And actually, when I taught music, I taught guitar and piano. And even my guitar students, when it came time to theory, we would do what we had to do on the guitar. But when it came time to theory, I always took them to a piano. And luckily, the studio I taught in had a piano in the room where I taught guitar also. So it made it very easy for me just to move back and forth between the two. So if you are or if you are not familiar with the major scale, we're going to run over that real quick. And we're going to do this in the key of C on the piano. So the C major scale is... And yes, this is going to be very basic, because in order to understand theory, I'm assuming that you know a little bit of theory or no theory, so we're going to kind of go back to zero and show you why I think learning theory on the piano is just a better solution all the way around. So on the major scale, if you follow the C major scale, the major scale is lined down this way. Between the first and second, there is a whole step. That's a whole step. Two semitones equals a whole step. Between the second and third is a whole step. Between the third and fourth is a half step. No black key on the C major scale on a piano. Between 4 and 5 a whole step. 5 and 6 a whole step. 6 and 7 a whole step. 7 and 8 is a half step. Again, no black key. So it's very easy to visualize this, and it's easy to memorize this, because you've got the perfect roadmap right here. Everywhere there is a half step in the key of C on a piano, there is no black key. So it's very easy to understand 1, 2, 3, half step between 3 and 4, 4, 5, 6, 7, half step between 7 and 8. That makes it incredibly easy to understand. This made it very easy for them to memorize, because all they had to do was to go to a piano and find the C's And like I said, the white keys in the key of C line out to the major scale perfectly because you don't have to move through any of the black keys. It's simply now, with this little bit of knowledge, it was easy for them to move through the other scales. And give you an example. If we go to the key of G and you apply the same exact formula of the major scale, first to second is a whole step, second to third whole step, third to fourth half, fourth to fifth whole, fifth to sixth whole, sixth to seventh is a whole step. So here, since we don't have a black key here in the middle, now we have to go up 2 semitones. Here is now our whole step. And in between 7 and 8, we have a half step, which is 1 semitone. So this is what gives us the F sharp. And the scale, again, is we followed the same pattern as we did in the C major scale. And since the key of G, you have to have a whole step between 6 and 7, that gives us the F sharp. Inevitably, I would always have a student ask me, okay, why is this an F sharp? Would that not be a G flat? No. And the reason is because we have a G natural in the G minor scale. Of course, in this case, the G just happens to be our tonic or our root. And since we have a G natural, this cannot be a G flat. This has to be an F sharp because we do not have an F natural in the key of G. We skip over the F natural, which means this has to be an F sharp. That made it incredibly easy for them to learn the major scale. And what I would do when I taught is I would have them write out all the scales. And inevitably, if they were doing it during the lesson, they would go to the piano because it was just so much easier to understand. Now you gotta remember, we were learning theory. And granted, yes, we took the theory and we applied it to the guitar, but right now we have to get the knowledge. You can't speak Japanese without knowing how to speak Japanese. You can't use theory until you understand the theory. So I made sure we understood the theory, then we would apply theory to the instruments. So moving on, let's just, following the same formula, let's do one more. Let's do the key of B. And we're going to move through the same exact steps as we did for the C major scale. And if you notice on this one, it is going to bring in all the black keys on this scale. So as you can see, the B major scale has 5 sharps. Well, why are these 5 sharps and not 5 flats? Again, we got to look at our natural notes. We know B is a natural note, so this cannot be a B flat. Then also we have an E natural, so this cannot be an E flat. So that means this note has to be an A sharp because we do not have an A natural. This note has to be a D sharp because we do not have a D natural. So that's what makes learning theory on a piano so much easier. Okay, well that's just scales. You memorize the pattern, you move on. You can do that anywhere. You can do that on guitar. That is very true. But also chord structure is incredibly easy on a piano. Check this out. So let's make a C major chord. Now what a chord is a chord is a triad, which is made of 3 notes. You have your root, you have your third, and you have your fifth. So in order to make a triad, what we are doing is we are literally stacking thirds. What does that mean? We're adding the third note of the scale each time we go up. So if we go from the root, which is C, to the E, which is our third, we're going up 3. 1, 2, 3. Our third to our fifth, which is G in this case, we go up 3. 1, 2, 3. So we are stacking thirds. And that gives us a C major. If we wanted to make this a C major 7, we would continue to stack thirds. Here's our root to third, our third to fifth, our fifth to seventh. C major 7. And again, that's why chord structure in theory is so much easier on a piano. If we wanted to take this same C major and turn this into a C minor, we simply lower the third 1/2 step. This makes the C major a C minor. And as you can tell, that is very visual. If we wanted to take the same C major chord and turn this into an augmented C, when you augment a chord, you raise the fifth 1/2 step. C major, C major augmented. And the reason it works this way is because, let's say we take a G chord on a guitar. We have 6 strings on an open G chord that we're having to play across. The reason we fret the guitar the way we do is because we have to make all those notes equal 3 notes. And in this case, the notes are G, B, and D. So we fret chords the way we do to make all those 6 strings equal those 3 notes. Well, for the sake of argument, let's say we're playing a G major on a guitar, but now you want to play a G minor. Well, now you have to change your entire position, because in an open chord of G major, you have an open B, which happens to be the 2nd string on the guitar. Well, when we move that G to a G minor, we have to flatten that B. Well, since the string's open, it's up against the nut. We can't flatten that B. So we have a couple of options. We can try to mute that B, too much work. Or we have to change the chord position, which in the case of the guitar, you do, going from an open G to a G minor. But on the piano, if we play a G, and we need to make a G minor, we simply lower the third. If we wanted to make this G a G7, we simply add a third on top of the 5th. All right, so why are we adding it here and not here? Well, that is a G7. But a G major 7, because we're stacking major thirds, because of our scale of the major scale. And if you remember, the key of G has an F sharp. So to make a G major 7, but to make this into a G7, what you would do is minor the 7th. To make this into a G minor 7, you would minor the 3rd also. And you can see how visual this is. When you need to go up a 1/2 step, you're literally just moving up a 1/2 step. When you need to go down a 1/2 step, you're literally moving one down a 1/2 step. If you go to a B major, if you want to make this a diminished chord, you lower the 5th a 1/2 step, you lower the 3rd a 1/2 step. B major, lower the 3rd and 5th 1/2 step, B diminished. That's what I mean by the piano is extremely visual. It's very easy to understand moving up and down 1/2 steps and whole steps. It's so much easier to understand going from a major to a minor, or from to an augmented chord, going from a G major 7 to a G minor 7. Because all you got to do is know on minors and majors, you're raising and lowering the 3rd a 1/2 step. For 7 chords, from like a G7 to a G major 7, you're raising and lower the 7th a 1/2 step. And it's very easy to visualize that on a piano. And that's why when I teach theory, I teach on a piano, because it's just so much easier to comprehend on a piano. Now, inevitably, once we started to get a grasp of the theory, we would start applying this to guitar, because what's the point of learning this if you're a guitar player if you're never going to apply it to your instrument? Even though it's the same concept, but it's a completely different approach on a guitar, especially when we start doing scale work. Now, once you learn the basic major scale on a guitar, for whatever note you're playing, it doesn't change. If you're doing it in the key of A or if you're doing it in the key of G, the pattern is the same all the way around. But since the guitar is not very linear, I can show you numerous ways to play those patterns on a guitar from different points. On a piano, if you're playing the key of G, you're pretty much playing. And it works the same way with chords. On a piano, there is basically, well, not basically, there is literally 3 ways to play a chord on a piano. If we play a C chord, we have our root position, because the root's on bottom. So this is our root. We have our first position, where we take the root and we move it to the top, but the 3rd and the 5th stay where they're at. First position. We go to 2nd position. Now we're moving our 3rd to the top. The 5th stays where it's at. So we have 5th, root, 3rd. Those are the only 3 ways to play a C chord on a piano. And I'm talking a straight C major chord. I can show you numerous ways to play a C major chord on a guitar. So the concept behind the piano was so much easier to grasp. And also, it kind of doubles you down on your theory, because after we learn it here, we have to go back and start applying it to a guitar. Well, guess what? We're going back over all these same principles again on theory. So it just kind of helps ingrain it even deeper into your brain. So you're basically doing double the work. Well, theory is one of those things you simply can't know enough. You need to know all the theory that you can know if you truly want to be a musician. So, if you're a guitar player and you're serious about learning theory, if you have a piano at your house, go over to the piano, start breaking it down. There's millions of great books on theory. If you don't have a piano, but you are dead serious about learning theory, go buy you a cheap little keyboard. You can get those little cheap little keyboards at Guitar Center or somewhere. Just enough that has enough keys that you could probably move through 2 octaves, which would be from C to C to C. And that's really about all you need. And I promise you, the learning curve on theory gets a hell of a lot less steep when you've got something as visual as a piano you can apply it to. So, on that note, we're going to wrap it up right there. Like I said, this really wasn't a theory lesson. This was more of an easier way to learn theory, because, you know, when I'm grooming through YouTube, like everybody else does, you know, you flip in and out of channels and you read the comments and you read this, and I always see a lot of people asking for theory classes. And I see a lot of people approaching it, and they're not approaching it wrong, and I'm absolutely not saying that. I just think that there are easier ways to approach theory. And in my opinion, the easiest way to do it is simply on a piano. I'm really not going to get into a theory class. If enough people ask me to teach theory, then I will. But there is so much theory stuff on the internet already. But I will gladly do it if enough people ask me to. If you do have something in particular you want to know, drop me a line and I will answer it. And if it's something that's a little more deep, then hell, I may just do another video on it. I will have other videos on theory, but they're going to be on specific things, like using a dominant 5 chord in a minor passage, which is one of my favorite things to do. It's just cool, and it just changes the entire sound of your minor songs by adding a dominant 5th into it. And at one point, I will probably go over the modes, simply because there's so much misinformation on modes on the internet. Somebody put out a video that said if you wanted to play the modes, basically if you start at your tonic, let's say C, and you play the C scale. Well, if you want to play the Dorian mode, you simply play from the D. And you make that your tonic center. In theory, that's correct, but that's not what people need to know. You need to know, if that was the case, then what about all these sharps and flats? How can we change modes writing sharps and flats if it was simply that simple? Well, it's not simply that simple. There's so much that everybody's leaving out. And apparently somebody made that video, and then a lot of other people, I guess, that didn't really understand modes jumped on that bandwagon. Then they made millions of videos of the same exact thing. If you want to play C, play here. Well, if you want to play C in the Dorian mode, play here. That does not give you the information needed for the modes. Plain and simple. So I'll probably be doing one over modes. If you have any comments, put it in the comments section. If you have any questions, put it in the comments section. Like I said, I'm not going to do a theory class. If enough people ask me to do it, I will do it. But I will be starting it from zero. If I go down this road, I'm going to go from the beginning, and I'm going to move forward through it. And theory there's a lot. There's a tremendous amount. Normally at this point, I would say grab that guitar, practice hard, play hard, and rock hard. But since I do not have a guitar in my hands and we are doing theory, I'm going to say sit your ass at a piano, learn some theory, then grab your guitar, practice hard, play hard, and rock hard.